make sure it's recording. Shalom. First and foremost, like to give all praise to Yahweh, Ba'Hashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'Hashem, Merkakadash, double honors, the elders and apostles of Great Millstone, who are teachers of truth and sincerity. And shout out to the Akims out there in the four corners of the earth to proclaim this truth. Braka the Yahweh, Braka the Yahweh Shai, Ba'Hashem, Merkakadash, Brakatam. Well, this guy just keeps on getting more popular, right? King Nero, right? You know, and fucking off more neighbors, right? More allies, you know. Trump slaps 50% tariffs against Canada, which is probably where a lot of people, especially in the video gaming industry, or if you collect records or 8-tracks, get a lot of their shit from Canada. Well, not with Trump around. You ain't even going to get things where the U.S. dollar actually used to have a lot of buy power in Canada. Well, thanks to Trump, no way, because you'll get nailed for that goddamn shipping. U.S. President Trump slapped 50% tariffs on a broad range of Canadian imports, citing what he called Ottawa's unequal treatment of American cars, dairy products, and alcohol. Oh man, fucking Molson Ice is going to cost me more? Oh, well, I guess I have no choice but to drink some other IPA type of beer, right? Maybe I'll get Foster's, How to Spike Australian or something, you know. But with this fucking guy, he'll probably slap tariffs against Australia too, knowing him, right? You know, make America hate it again. It's hilarious to watch, right? But that's not the least of worries, but most people would be worried about that sort of thing, right? So we already know in the mid of August, ain't gonna be fucking gas anymore. Yo, you're gonna start seeing the shortages really hit in the middle of August. Now, we already know that the supplies have been out for about a week. You know, as of last week, that's when officially, you know, the reserves were gone. Okay, according to what Trump had said, what he leaked out. So what does he do? Raises more tariffs, right? Just to make sure nobody's gonna do any commerce with Babylon. You know, because they're fucking tired of this asshole. Trump's use of emergency powers to impose sweeping tariffs was partly struck down by U.S. Supreme Court earlier this year. He invoked Section 338 of the Tariff Act of 1930 to impose new duties. These tariffs will take effect in 30 days and apply to even goods covered by the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Free Trade Agreement, the White House announced Monday. This move marks the latest escalation in trade war that has intensified since Trump's return to D.C. D.C. has already imposed tariffs against Canadian steel, aluminum, automobiles, and other imports. Ottawa has responded with counter tariffs and other retaliatory measures, and like everything else, though, there's more here. As Press TV, yeah, the one that they don't want you to be able to see, yeah. They shut down Press TV from you being able to view it, but they still have a Facebook channel that still works, so we'll play that.
The US President Donald Trump has imposed a 50% tariff on a wide range of Canadian imports, accusing Ottawa of discriminatory trade practices against American businesses. The new tariffs, which will take effect on August 19th, apply to certain dairy products, motor vehicles and other goods. Trump says Canada has maintained a 25% tariff on U.S. motor vehicles that do not qualify for duty-free treatment under a trilateral agreement between U.S., Canada and Mexico. Trump further argued that Canada's tariff policy unfairly targets U.S.-made vehicles, placing American businesses at a disadvantage compared with competitors from other countries. The White House said Canadian imports of U.S. motor vehicles declined by 22% following the introduction of Ottawa's tariff measures. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has responded by saying that Ottawa stands ready to intensify trade talks with Washington in the coming days. The U.S. President Donald...
So there you go. He imposes tariffs, and Canada also goes in for the kill shot, as this video gets into. So we'll just take a look at what's going on here.
Learn your lesson, Donald. Never provoke Canada. Canada is furious, and it is responding in such a powerful way to Donald Trump's latest tariff threats, where Donald Trump has stated he will tariff Canada 50% against Canadian hockey sticks and other items. Canada is now checkmating Donald Trump, and in such a unified way. You have the Premier of British Columbia, David Eby of the NDP party. You have the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford of the Conservative Party, and at the federal level, Prime Minister Carney, all responding with one unified voice. Canada will not back down. And if Donald Trump does not taco at the end of this 30-day deadline that he's given Canada, Canada will also respond with force. Canada is not going to stop banning U.S. booze. The Canadian people are not going to stop boycotting United States travel and U.S. products. Canada is standing strong, and that was the message in a united way that the premiers and Prime Minister Carney conveyed. For example, David Eby, the Premier of British Columbia, said, you know what? I feel bad for Americans, because if you can't be friends with Canada, then you don't have any friends anywhere at all. Watch this.
I feel sorry for Americans. If you can't be friends with Canada, then you almost certainly do not have a friend anywhere in the world. And that is a very lonely place to be.
More from Premier Eby right here, and he says, you think, Donald, that you can bully us into submission? You are very much mistaken. The idea that you think you will huff and puff and Canada will submit? Canada will never submit, Donald. Play this clip.
And the idea of the president that he can bully us into whatever he wishes is incorrect. We're strong. We are, despite our many debates, united as a country, and we will continue to stand strong. And we will build relationships with those countries at the national level, at the provincial level, that want to have a relationship with us.
More from David Eby right here. Let's play it.
There is not a chance in hell that U.S. alcohol is going back on the shelf in British Columbia. And I'm proud of that, and I know the British Columbians support that.
And then the Premier of British Columbia, David Eby, says, you know what?
No more bud for you.
Doug Ford, the right-wing Conservative Premier of Ontario, he and I, we may disagree on a lot of things. I mean, you have Eby, the more far-left NDP party. Then you have Ford, kind of a far-right guy, who used to be Maple MAGA, by the way, until Donald Trump, tried to take over Canada. And then even Doug Ford stood up to Donald Trump lately. He goes, but Doug Ford and I are united. We have a similar mind on this issue. You cannot embolden the bully. You need to punch the bully in the face. You need to punch the bully in the face, and you need to knock the bully out. Here, play this clip.
I think Doug and I are of a similar mind on this issue. The one way to embolden a bully is to capitulate, and I don't think we should embolden Mr. Trump, who clearly is a bully.
And we heard from Premier Ford of Ontario, who said,
that bully's being stood up to by
not
all.
Constantly be on the defense. We always need to stand up to the bully. We need to hit him back, and hit him back hard. Play this clip.
If these talks fail in 29 days, we need to hit him back as hard as we can. I'm tired of the bully trying to take our lunch money all the time. We always seem to be on our back heels. We need to be on the offense, not constantly on the defense with President Trump. We need to stand up to the bully, and we need to hit him tariff to tariff, all the way across the board. And that's my message to the Prime Minister. We need a plan moving forward.
And of course, we will not lift the booze ban, Doug Ford says. Let's play this clip.
Sounds to me like the booze ban is not going to get lifted by Ontario.
No.
We've got the tariffs being lifted on steel.
That is correct, 100%. Again, we have to negotiate through strength, not weakness. And we need to throw everything on the table. But I'm going to emphasize one more time. It can't always be Ontario. It has to be a Team Canada approach. And that's my message to my great friends, my premier friends, that we have to be united. As I always say, united we stand, divided we fall. Okay, I'm just... Who's not carrying the weight? It just seems like Ontario's always out there, no matter if it's electricity or if it's alcohol or anything else. In manufacturing, Ontario's getting hurt the most in these tariffs. Right across the... No, it's not because of the alcohol ban. This is a broader issue of tariffs right across the board. He wants to continue threatening, and he's nothing but a bully. That's all he is. And you have to stand up to the bullies in the schoolyard, or they end up taking their lunch money. And we are going to continue. We are going to continue fighting like we've never fought before.
And Doug Ford says, we are an energy powerhouse. We could dismantle the United States if we wanted. And yes, the Canadian people will feel pain in this, of course. But we should be united. We are ready to sacrifice. And we should make the United States squirm. Watch what Ford has to say. Let's play.
I'm sorry, you go ahead.
This latest list,
Yes.
what is the economic impact, the hit to Ontario, should this come into effect in 29 days? Have you quantified that? Can you
What I understand is $28 billion across the country. Majority is going to be here in Ontario. That's why we can't roll over. We have to hit back. We have to, rather than be on our back heel, as I said, we have to go forward, take the offense. We are an energy powerhouse, and we can dismantle the U.S. if we wanted to, if we all work together. No matter if it's the electricity, and I'm not speaking for the other provinces, I'm going to be very clear. The potash, the oil, we're the #1 customer in the world. They need to feel the pain, rather than us constantly feeling the pain.
More from Ford over here. Trump thinks he can bully us, make us roll over. We ain't going to back down. We ain't going to back down. Play this clip.
If he continues to constantly bully us, we can't keep rolling over. We can't keep backing down. We have to go full tilt. We are an energy powerhouse. We have to utilize every tool we have in the toolbox and make sure he feels the pain. And I hate saying the American people, because I love the American people, and I know a lot of people down in the U.S. don't agree with President Trump. We need to get a deal.
But their king ain't with them, are they?
Right now, investment is solid in both countries. But if we get a deal, then people have certainty. They have production, and jobs are created. And if not, then People lose their jobs on both sides of the border. So this is critical.
More from EB over here. Let's play it.
This attempt by the president to hurt Canadians to, for some reason, attack our country was entirely predictable. He will probably do it again. And there's no reason to believe that this is the bottom in terms of where he's going to go.
And then EB says, obviously, the news of the day, Donald Trump levying more tariffs. But to me, it just comes from the fact that he's desperate. He's failing and he's flailing. Play this clip.
Obviously, the news of the day is the president's recent decision to levy more tariffs on Canada for reasons known only to him. I'll say that this feels like an increasingly desperate and flailing approach to relationships with our country.
So there you have it, though. And they're just calling out that bully. You know, it's trying to steal your lunch money. You know, it reminds me of a video I did, you know, as I was first getting into this truth about how Esau is that bully. Well, Donald Trump definitely fits that bully, you know, because he speaks for all Edomites in that essence. Yeah, I'm not talking about you simple Edomites. I'm talking about you wicked fucking ass Edomites. You know, not the tame snakes, but the fucking snakes in general, you know. You're a piece of shit. You're a fucking bully. And you need to be stood up to. You need to fucking get a fucking bloody nose. You know? You need to back the fuck down. You need to step the fuck back because you keep on fucking trying to come in, man. Guess what? The ones that are in the back corner are going to come out fighting. And that's what's happened with it. Even Iran said it, that we're to give them a bloody nose. You know, if Trump thinks that they could bully us, he's going to get a bloody nose. He's going to feel it. Drone war enters terrifying new phases. Russia deploys 300-mile-per-hour jet-powered Shahid. It authenticated the Salakia, my puppy was crying, so had to attend to that. As you know, she broke her leg a couple months ago. Got one more month of being in the cast, and then the real shit begins. Then, you know, trying to rehabilitate her and get her, hopefully, to be able to use the leg. After Esau, that fucking devil, you know, through his wicked fucking vets, tells me that, oh, amputation is the best second choice, which they want to charge you more for anyways. You know, because they made the fucking other way too fucking expensive just to put even bolts in there. Don't want to get into that. Just fucking tired of fucking Esau, but I'm glad. I'm glad to see that there's even better warfare out there, right? So, here we go. Russia deploys 300-mile-per-hour jet-powered Shahid. So, guess what? Even if Iran should use up all the drones, guess what? Russia's got even more for Iran to use. Although Iran, I think, has enough of them, but nonetheless so. That's another thing. Is if Russia has them, because remember, it was said a long time ago that Iran happens to have the best, you know, drones out there. Over 300 miles per hour. Well, it's no wonder why the U.S. can't even see them when they hit, when Iran retaliates. It authenticated the footage shows just how rapidly warfare is evolving beyond conventional two-stroke power plants toward miniature turbojets that sharply increase speed, compress warning and response times, potentially render many existing small drone interceptors ineffective and accelerate the overall tempo of combat across modern battlefields. And that's what's happening to the U.S. That's why they're losing so fast, because these things are so fast, you won't even see them. I remember Barack Obama said, I got two words for you, predator drones. You will never see them coming. Well, guess what? The other nations have them, and they're better at it, especially Iran. So that's what a Russian drone could do, and how fast it is. And that's for just somebody on the ground. IRGC claims Pentagon is underreporting U.S. military losses in Jordan. No shit. Yeah. If you believe Fox News and all that, they've only lost, well, Trump is saying that they've only lost maybe 18 soldiers in the whole war. Or maybe 30. In the whole war. Are you fucking kidding me? Every day they're getting hit harder every time they launch a terrorist attack against Iran. IRGC claimed on Tuesday that the U.S. Department of War is concealing the true number of U.S. military casualties resulting from attacks against American terrorists in Jordan. Statement further claimed the Pentagon was covering up losses sustained during attacks against U.S. military base in Jordan, which resulted in the deaths of a significant number of American terrorists. Claims could not be independently verified. According to U.S. Central Command, 2 soldiers were killed, and a third was reported missing. So they really ain't telling you shit. But here's what Trump said. Oh, it's less than 30. Oh, okay, my bad. He says only 18 troops have been killed during the war with Iran. You believe him, right? I mean, he's always been truthful. He's been honest. You know, he really says he doesn't care about anyone, just as long as Iran doesn't have a weapon. But Saudi Arabia can have nuclear enrichment. Saudi Arabia can develop nuclear weapons, but not Iran, just as long as Iran doesn't do it. You see how hypocritical this is? In a post on Truth Social, Trump wrote, military conflict with Iran, 4 months and 18 dead. The United States has carried out repeated waves of strikes on targets inside Iran in recent days, while Tehran has responded with attacks on military bases, facilities, and other sites it says are linked to D.C. across the region, including northern Iraq, which is a terrorist base that the U.S. has there, just like their terrorist bases in Syria, which was used to destroy the government of Syria with the Syrian Democratic Forces. You know, they use their terrorists, ISIS, to go in and finish Bashar al-Assad for the Greater Israel Project. So everybody knows that the U.S. funds and arms terrorists using the Kurdistan region in both Iraq and Syria. Escalation comes despite D.C. and Tehran signing the Memorandum of Understanding in June that includes ceasefire in the fighting, which began on 28th of February, and the launch of negotiations aimed at reaching a broader agreement. So, like everything else, though, well, you already know that that's all shredded. It was shredded the day that, on the very day that it began, when the Israeli state continued to attack Lebanon. Oh, but the U.S. is going to help them more with that, because you got to remember, IDF doesn't really want to use their soldiers. They want the U.S. to fight their war. Senate Democrats grill Hegseth as he seeks more funding for war against Iran, right? Democrats grilled U.S. Secretary of War Hegseth over the Iran war during his testimony before the U.S. Senate as D.C. requested additional funding for operations. Yep, they want more money. Got to have more money. We want your money.
Combat ineffective. Quote, Iran's entire ballistic missile production capacity, every company that builds every component of those missiles has been functionally defeated and destroyed.
Yep.
And that the missile program, existing stockpiles were depleted and decimated, almost completely ineffective. So why are there missiles left to hit Jordan and result in the loss of life of our brave men and women?
As we stated from the beginning, the Iranian defense industrial base is effectively gone, but they do have underground facilities because they're the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, and they've spent 47 years trying to hide their missiles under mountains, just like their nuclear capabilities, because they would like to get a nuclear weapon to wield it against us.
Of the war to believe. Because it's either over or it's not over. It's within 2 weeks or it's not 2 weeks. We have no missiles or we have missiles. And that consternation is why so many New Yorkers are perplexed, stressed out, and find this war to be incredibly unpopular because they don't understand the choices that the president's making. They don't agree with those.
Yep, exactly. And they're fucking tired of them. They're fucking tired of the lies. A lot of people died, but they're only saying that very little died. And like everything else, well, there's more, right? More shameful spewing on Esau Edom. Yep, more press TV videos as well as Stu Peters' network going in on this.
The average price for regular gasoline in the US has hit $4 per gallon as Washington's attacks on Iran forces the continued closure of Hormuz Strait. It is the first time the national average has at $4 or higher since June the 17th.
Oh, and that's only
Gas
Costco,
prices
though.
have trended higher again in the last 2 weeks amid renewed tensions in West Asia. Oil prices have also increased, with Brent rising 2% to trade above $90 per barrel on Monday, reaching its highest level since June the 11th. The new round of US attacks against Iran have reignited concerns over possible disruptions to global energy supplies, particularly through Iran's Strait of Hormuz, a key shipping route for about 20% of the world's oil. Iran's armed forces say they are in full control of the strait, and no amount of oil, gas, fertilizer can pass through via Hormuz Strait without Iran's permit.
Putin's decision to double down on their failed war against Iran with more attacks on Iranians and their civilian infrastructure has been met with historical disapproval from public opinion. A new poll shows that the net approval rating for the war stands at minus 30 points. In a country known for a patriotism which can too easily descend into jingoism, as well as for decades of Islamophobia and Iranophobia,
They're not
the Iran
saying
war is
jingle
already
bells?
the most unpopular war in American polling history.
Oh, I think it's unpopular, number one, because our president is not a popular president. Number two, he is not focusing on what Americans need. As prices rise, not just with gas, but with everything within our economy, people can't afford it. And they see him as enriching himself through this war.
The national average price of a gallon of gas has exploded back over.
So for the past week or so, the United States has been...
All right, hold on a second. Let me fix that. Gotta fix this size here. Yeah, so he's lost his popularity, right?
Up attacks on Iran, and in response, Iran has been launching attacks right back, pretty major ones, in fact. And over the weekend, you may have seen this, 3 U.S. troops were killed, or at least our government is telling us that 3 U.S. troops were killed, meaning that it's probably more likely about 300 Americans that are dead after U.S. forces in Jordan came under attack. And by the way, this is all in addition to American sites in Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Oman, and Qatar coming under attack as well. Americans have been scattered all across the Middle East to be used as human shields, cannon fodder, as bait, as human pretext for war with Iran and the establishment of Greater Israel for decades. Their lives, in front of the entire country, in front of the entire world, are being placed on a sacrificial chopping block so that their lives can be wasted in the name of Talmudic expansionism. That's what this is. That's what all of this is all about. It's about serving Israel and the cause of Zionism and the ultimate end goal of Zionism, which is to put the entire Middle East and then the world in a vice. And when I say that these Americans are in the Middle East as human shields, I mean that in the most literal sense of the term possible. Americans have now been killed in Jordan, a place where the only purpose an American presence could possibly serve is to defend Israel. And in the process of fulfilling that mission, once again, Americans have lost their lives. We've already seen high-rise apartment buildings in places like Jordan and in the Gulf states used to house American troops coming under attack with Iranian missiles and drones, smashing into the side of them and obviously killing and wounding a whole lot more Americans than this occupied government has let on. And now the footage is even worse. American troops left to die in the middle of Jordan as Iranian munitions smashed through their non-existent defense systems because all of their defense systems are busy defending Israel. Here it comes. And lights out. Yeah, those young Americans weren't just there to defend Israel, our greatest ally. Okay, no, they were there to die for Israel. There are a lot of perks to being a supporter of the Stu Peters Network. You're $9 a month or $90.
So, like everything else, so shameful speaking on Esau Edom. This guy, Stu Peters, goes into it quite a lot. Just like Kim Iverson does, and I got some more Kim Iverson. But here we go. Trump vows U.S. will destroy a bridge or power plant for each Iranian attack against shipping. Well, what do you think Iran's going to respond with? You go after a desalination plant? We'll go after one. You go after a bridge? Well, we might bomb your shit. Hey, man, he doesn't care. More telegraphing of intent from President Trump and below Truth Social Post. He said the U.S. military will bomb and destroy one bridge or power plant, including in Tehran. Each time the Iranian military shoots at a ship in the strait going illegally. This comes day after he unveiled the U.S. military plans to conduct large bombing of Iran's Pixax Mountain nuclear complex, which is heavily fortified. Iranians have already long demonstrated they won't alter course in the face of such threats, especially bluster, his bully talk, just like Canada won't. Everybody's standing up to this bully. And they're saying, you know what? Fuck you. Fuck you. Go ahead and do it, punk. You're going to get a fucking bloody nose. You keep on fucking pushing me over social media. And so this is unlikely to be any kind of fix for D.C. as Tehran vowed to keep control of the Hormuz at all costs. Pentagon has argued that things like bridges and dual use as the Iranian military uses them to get supplies from one region to another. So the U.S. thinks that they can tell them what they can do. Iranians have in turn widened attacks against Gulf states, including key civic infrastructure, and Kuwait's almost destroyed, by the way, like water desalination plants in Kuwait, each time their own infrastructure gets hit. So like everything else, Kuwait is probably going to be taken over. I heard a lot of talks about it, and guess what? Iraq will probably get Kuwait. Oh, wasn't that a turn of events? Yeah, when Kuwait no longer exists, they're going to need a governing body, a real government in there to control it. Because the Emir of Kuwait, what did he do? Oh, he just fled to Saudi Arabia. Well, Iraq took Kuwait. Well, guess what? Iraq just might end up getting Kuwait. Because there was originally a plan for Saddam Hussein to actually control all the oil if he could win the war against Iran, which he failed to do so, which is the whole total basis for going to war with Saddam Hussein to begin with, because he didn't get the job done. He couldn't break the will of Iran, and he could not take over Iran. Even though he was given chemical weapons to use against them, still Iran never folded, not even with chemical weapons. Which the U.S. has been using white phosphorus bombs in Gaza, aka the Israelis, because you could say America and Israel won. They're the Greater Israel Project. They've been using them in Syria, and yet have the audacity to accuse Iraq of using them when they've been using them against Iraq, especially Fallujah, with these depleted uranium weapons, which they say that Saudi Arabia can have, right? Shipping firms offering sailors massive bonuses to risk crossing Hormuz. Is it worth it for your life? Is it worth it to be on a sinking ship? Oh, we're going to pay you more if you can make it. Sinco Group, the world's largest owner of super tankers, offered its crew 6 months of extra salary to make a return voyage collecting oil from Saudi Arabia or Iraq and unloading it in the Gulf of Oman. A trip the company said would take around a month. So they still think that they can bypass Iran. Since the start of the terrorist war against Iran, at least 59 commercial ships have come under attack in and around the Persian Gulf, with 17 seafarers killed. The cost of shipping has surged since the attacks against commercial vessels drove traffic through the strait to near collapse. So like everything else though, you know, again the U.S. is losing this battle for the strait. So Pixax Mountain is one of the facilities that Trump is threatening to bomb, you know, which is part of a nuclear enrichment or uranium enrichment. But Iran's not building a nuclear weapon, even though they're getting accused of it. But Saudi Arabia can have them. Remember, Saudi Arabia can have them. Okay, just Iran can't get them because Israel says so, right? Tehran warns that bombing its nuclear infrastructure would further expand the U.S.-Israeli war. U.S. President Trump threatened to attack Pixax Mountain, the fortified underground facility at the center of renewed Israeli claims about Iran's nuclear program. Tehran warned that any strike on its nuclear facilities would widen the regional war. Israeli state says Iran transferred enriched uranium and advanced centrifuges to the mountain after U.S. and Israeli attacks damaged other nuclear sites. So basically, and they have no evidence, but Trump acknowledged it. D.C. could not confirm the assertion. You know, he just pretty much goes on whatever King Bibi tells him. Well, there's a reason for that, right? The Epstein files. So, got this here as the English translation is already in it. So I'm going to play this here because when I download it, it doesn't give the English translation. So, just going to go ahead and play it. This is just kind of a brief on what's going on.
Good afternoon, friends. Welcome back to our broadcast, where we will be reporting on this event as air raid sirens are currently sounding in 3 Middle Eastern capitals. This is happening while Iranian missiles, according to several reports, are impacting strategic United States facilities in 3 different countries. We are talking about Jordan, Bahrain, and Kuwait, which are currently being attacked simultaneously. An attack that began last night with quite escalated tension, which has now turned into a highly coordinated offensive by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, who have claimed this as part of this new operation called NASR 2. And well, that is the name Iran has given to this new onslaught. The explosions are reported primarily at the Sarka Air Base, which is, let's remember, the headquarters of the 5th Fleet, but the one in Manaki, the Arifshan military camp in Kuwait, is also reported to have sustained damage at this time. Confirmed explosions that show Iran has decided, and this proves it to us, to move from threats to concrete actions. We are not talking, friends, only about a symbolic attack. Now it is no longer an isolated flare-up. Evidently, this is a very well-planned response after 10 consecutive nights of U.S. bombing on Iranian soil, and above all, an escalation that Washington initiated by attacking the Darkovan nuclear plant, and now it has Iran taking revenge for this. It has settled all that debt from the bombing of its nuclear plant, a it is charging the United States for it with accumulated interest, not just from this event, but from decades. These reports that are coming in, friends, are more serious than they seem. So we are going to get into the details. But first, let me introduce myself for those who are new to the channel. I am Victor. This is TMF News, and in this broadcast, I will break down admissions by the Pentagon regarding this concealment of figures. Just a while ago, I was informing, using U.S. media, not Iranian, Russian, or Chinese, but U.S. media, CNN, CBS News, which are releasing these leaks that Trump had hidden at least 100 casualties in the last 10 days alone from these bombings. And, well, the rules of the game seem to be changing already. This hell began for the United States with the Tower 22 base in Jordan, which, as you recall, was bombed over the weekend, resulting in the deaths of 3 soldiers acknowledged by the U.S. It is said that the number is much higher than that. Well, once again, this recently bombed base, Tower 22, has been hit by multiple missiles.
Slovakia, as you know, this is actually not on my VLC player.
You're not ready for it.
So
that reportedly bypassed the U.S. air defense system, which appears to be seeing its effectiveness reduced. The Jordanian army has already claimed it shot down 3 projectiles and 5 drones. They say the columns of smoke could even be seen from the capital. There are various reports indicating that at least several of these Iranian missile strikes from a few hours ago successfully reached their targets. In Bahrain, where these events are also being reported, sirens are sounding. Residents of Manama are posting on social media and replicating these reports in the media. As you can see, this is even from a U.S. source, so you can see it's not an isolated report from Iran, but that U.S. media outlets themselves are acknowledging these attacks in Bahrain, Kuwait, and Jordan. Explosions near the U.S. Fifth Fleet, the main U.S. naval command in the Persian Gulf. Also in Kuwait, where it is said these attacks occurred very close to the Al-Zour power plant and Camp Arifian, which were attacked with drones that, according to various Iranian sources, caused significant damage to logistics infrastructure. And the U.S. Central Command has already confirmed the death, as we all know, 4 military personnel in Jordan. Well, there is talk of 3 dead and 1 missing. A figure that, as I mentioned this morning, CBS News has refuted with this disastrous number that the Pentagon tried to hide. It is said there are more than 100 U.S. casualties in the last 10 days. There is simply talk of several soldiers killed. Many media outlets at this point prefer to just say that. In the United States, they don't even mention the exact figure. They don't specify the exact number. But in any case, it seems to me there is clear evidence that it is an attack that managed to cause brutal casualties among U.S. personnel. The Trump administration, in fact, has already called for an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council. Now, all of a sudden, the United States remembers the UN. When it suits them, for what suits them, they call the Security Council to warn that Iran will pay a very high price, they say, for every fallen soldier. In other words, if Iran kills a soldier, the price will be high. If the United States bombs an elementary school with 168 children, well, no problem, absolutely. Nothing happens.
Because it's fun, remember. Trump says
the way
it's
the Trump
fun.
administration is behaving in the UN Security Council leaves a lot to be desired. We don't see a de-escalation. We don't see an attempt at mediation. We don't see a diplomatic hand. What we see is this: I can hit you and even kill civilians, wipe out an entire girls' school, but you can't defend yourself. You can't launch an attack, because if one of our boys dies, then you're going to have to answer to me. And this, of course, friends, leads us to wonder what kind of response. The White House is now considering, where it seems they have already tried everything. Right now, there is a lot of nervousness about what might come from the Pentagon, which has acknowledged that its Patriot systems are not managing to intercept all the missiles falling on them. In fact, there is talk of
with over 300 miles per hour, how are you going to?
The lowest interception rate ever recorded. What does this tell us? That Iranian offensive technology has improved a lot, has evolved, and has found a way to break through U.S. anti-aircraft defenses. They've got their measure, and it's dangerous. Also, $5 million, as I told you yesterday, is what a failed U.S. interception costs against a cheap Iranian drone that costs a fraction of nothing. I mean, there is talk that in the most expensive scenarios it costs around $30,000. Just imagine this. So we must remember, of course, that this is what we were talking about when we mentioned asymmetry in war. This is Iran's asymmetric warfare. This is the surprise it had prepared for the United States. 10 consecutive nights now of mutual bombing. A campaign starting with the attack on the Darko nuclear plant, and which is now continuing with incursions into the provinces of Khuzestan, Bushehr, Washington, The United States is launching these attacks with justifications, arguing that they seek to degrade Iran's ability to threaten maritime traffic. The problem is that, as far as we know, Bushehr is a nuclear power plant. It has nothing military about it unless they want to cause a nuclear disaster. They are attacking bridges, civilians, railways, facilities, and highly densely populated centers. It has nothing to do with the Iranian militias or the IRGC. Iran, well, of course, is responding, and it is through these bombings that they are escalating the conflict even further. And here we are, watching the development of this. We have a lot to report today. In a moment, we will reconnect because there are more bombings at other U.S. bases that should not be confused with this. And, of course, alarming news about United States ammunition reserves. We are referring to missiles from Patriot and Tomahawk, as well as assets like the MQ-9 Reaper drones. The F-16s are in a quite critical situation. Quite critical. And
so there you are, man. Everything's depleted, right? Like Biden said, oh, we're out of ammo. Yep, you're out of ammo. In other words, you're all bark but no bite. But Kim Iverson also goes into this, right? So Kim Iverson has been right about it all the time. And she recently has talked to Professor Morandi, who, is very well respected in Iran, and, is like Colonel McGregor is over here, and like Scott Ritter is over here. And he's conveying the same thing, that pretty much the U.S. is going to continue to lose unless they back down. Iran is going to give them a bloody nose, one unlike before, because Iran did not want this war, but the U.S. pushed them into a war for greater Israel. And it has huge consequences for the world economy. Iran can sustain, but can the rest of the world? You see, that's just it. You got the problem. The crisis has begun, and like everything else, probably in the middle of next month, going into September and October, you're going to see a lot of gas stations closed because they simply do not have fuel. They don't have the means of getting fuel, which is going to continue. They're going to eventually cause the MOTB to be mandated. That's what's coming throughout all this as we get into this.
War that is obviously ramped up in Iran. We have unfortunately lost some soldiers to this really unnecessary war for Israel. It's absolutely devastating that this has gone on. It's absolutely devastating we're still doing this, that we are sacrificing the lives of American young men and women. I think they've been releasing the identities, and one was a 19-year-old girl and I think a 25-year-old guy, and it's just senseless, absolutely senseless. So what is the Iranian perspective of this? Of course, is a big question that we want to know, because we're always hearing the American perspective. It's, of course, Trump and Hegseth coming out saying they pummeled Iran, they've defeated their military, I don't know how many times, they've denuclearized them another how many times. We keep hearing this, and yet we are still at war. So what is the Iranian perspective on this? We, of course, have our wonderful guest who joins us to give us the Iranian perspective, Professor Morandi. He joins us, and we're going to just get right into it. So, Professor Morandi, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's always a pleasure.
Well, not always, because it seems like when we have you on, it's always because there's bad news, right? We're back at war. It seems like we're back at full-fledged war. From the Iranian perspective, are we back at full-fledged war?
We are definitely moving in that direction, and I think that the coming days will probably be very decisive, and it will determine how things move forward. From the very beginning, the Iranians were very skeptical of Trump's agreeing to the signed MOU, and it was clear from the start that he wasn't serious. He began violating the MOU. From day one, he refused to release the Iranian stolen assets, which was a part of the deal. After a few days, he reversed the lifting of sanctions on Iran's oil exports. Another violation, he expanded the sanctions regime. Another violation, he refused to force the Israeli regime to leave Lebanon and to stop bombing Lebanon. Another violation. And the list goes on, the threats made against Iranian leaders and the Iranian people, that's a violation of the deal. And then ultimately, Trump tried to, while violating all of these elements of the deal, he tried to create a corridor in the Strait of Hormuz, which is a violation of Article 5. And along with the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Qataris, they tried to have ships go through there to undermine Iran's position in the Strait of Hormuz. And the Iranians said, we will not accept that. So for days, they warned the Americans, they warned these regimes, they warned the tankers, and then ultimately the Iranians had to strike them. And the United States attacked Iran, yet another violation, they reimposed the siege, meaning they violated all of the articles of the deal. So it was pretty clear from the beginning that the United States would not be serious about their commitments, and that's why the Iranians were preparing themselves since the ceasefire began and since the MOU was signed.
Have you ever looked yourself up online What's shocking is how much private information is out there for anyone to find on each of us.
Gotta
I saw
get
the
past the
quote, Dare Me
commercial.
security number being out there for everybody. Last August, I actually had some brokers are allowed to even know you can, inside the app, you can man a password management quickly. You can discover all of this information. Watch a lot of Fox News. Who, in fact, that's a quote from a Fox News anchor. Many people who watch Fox News, they believe this. They've been told this. There's a lot of
and
really angry Trump
parents.
supporters right now saying, "Wait a minute, how could Iran even strike all these U.S. bases, killing U.S. soldiers? How is this even possible?" Because Trump said so. Trump said that the Iranian military was completely demolished. So, what is the truth on that? Is the Iranian military at least, is there any partial truth to that? Is the Iranian military at all hobbled? Is it damaged to some degree? What's your take on that?
The Iranian military today is stronger than it was when the war began 4 or 5 months ago. And the Americans failed on all accounts. They sank a few ships in port, but those ships weren't for fighting. They were for patrolling the coastline for smugglers and for that sort of thing, to prevent pirates from boarding commercial ships in the Indian Ocean. So those ships were basically to help international shipping and security. They weren't for fighting a naval battle. The Iranian Air Force has also been taken to places where they're well protected, deep underground. And I think one of the major miscalculations of the United States, if not the second most important miscalculation, was the fact that they did not comprehend the importance of Iran's underground bases. Missile bases, drone bases, factories underground, and storage sites for speedboats, for aircraft, for anti-aircraft missile systems, and for their needs in case of a ground operation. So the United States basically doesn't know what's going on underground. And they miscalculated Iran's missile capabilities, and we're seeing the Iranians badly damage U.S. assets across the region from morning to night. Of course, the Iranians also have been using many thousands of decoys, and Chinese decoys are very, very good. The Iranians have used some of their own, but it's mostly Chinese. So the Americans and Israelis have bombed many thousands of decoys, and the Iranians have replaced them with new decoys. So no, things are not good for the United States. Iran is stronger today than it was at the beginning of the war, as I said, because Iran is producing more missiles and more drones, and it is also employing new technology. It's expanding its underground bases, and it is using its experiences from the previous wars to engage in warfare now. And we are seeing that Iranian missiles today are more accurate than they were 4 months ago. But the most important and biggest miscalculation of the United States was underestimating the sheer amount of support that the Islamic Republic of Iran has among its own people. And that was clear from the funerals. And for the first time, they were so massive that the United States could not hide it. In the past, they would always say thousands of people would gather in rallies, or they would say, this is AI. I remember after the riots, there were huge gatherings in Tehran and other cities to protest the violent insurrection that took place a few months ago with the support of Western intelligence agencies and the Mossad. And the numbers were huge. And there was helicopter footage, and then Western media said this is AI. This time around, they were so massive, and unfortunately, there were a lot of journalists from abroad, including a lot of alternative media journalists, and they just couldn't hide it anymore. So the sheer amount of support that the Islamic Republic has, the public legitimacy, is far greater than what Western governments have. And the depth of that legitimacy is far greater than what exists in the West. And I think that is something that they should have understood. I think they believe their own propaganda and their own narratives that they've been promoting for decades through their so-called Iran experts and through these so-called Iranians who work in their think tanks and in the media. People basically say what elites in the West or in the United States in particular want to hear. And so they believe the nonsense that Iran is weak, it is corrupt, it is collapsing, it is imploding, the regime, as they love to call it, is unpopular, and all you have to do is just push it a bit and it falls like a house of cards. They should have learned that this was a major miscalculation after the 12-day war. They didn't. They brought in they brought in the U.S. military. Again, they failed, and now they're going to fail again. But the difference this time is that probably the global economy will collapse and will move towards a Great Depression. There's a very good book that I think I may have told you about before, Going to Tehran, by Flint and Hillary Leverett. And they were former White House officials, and they spoke about, it's a very good book I think people should read. If you read it, I think it'll be very much worth your while. They dealt with a lot of the myths about Iran, but they also predicted that this would happen ultimately. But instead of listening to these very good scholars and people with experience on the ground, Western elites scoffed and ignored them and moved towards escalation, and now we're where we are today.
Right. You're saying that they actually predicted that we'll end up in a hot war with Iran, that that's just where things are headed.
Yes, in the book Going to Tehran, Flint and Hillary Leverett, they basically say that this is, if we continue down the road that we are pursuing, that ultimately we're going to get into conflict. And they were saying that we should move towards rapprochement. Again, it's a very good book. It's another good book to read it by Alistair Crook, who I'm sure you've seen online. He does different programs. He wrote a very good book called Resistance. the essence of the Islamist revolution. These two books, I think, if people read, they'll have a much better understanding of our region and Iraq.
Thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson Show, which you can watch in its entirety Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. It is free at KimIversonShow.com.
So there you have it, though. These are just snippets from her show. But nonetheless, though, she's been pretty right about everything. You know, and, you know, no matter how much they gaslight, you got too much alternative media that's telling you what's really going on, that even the mainstream can't really hide it anymore. They can't gaslight people like they used to. Esau's lost his ability to lie to the people. Trump greenlights Saudi nuclear deal, uranium enrichment in the kingdom. President Trump has formally approved landmark 30-year civil nuclear cooperation agreement with Saudi Arabia that could be worth tens of billions of dollars that put American companies at the center of kingdom's nuclear build-out, according to Wall Street Journal. So, you know, making money, you know, and allowing them to have nuclear weapons. But Iran can have a nuclear weapon. You see the hypocrisy of it. But he's definitely profiting from the war. Saying, well, Iran can't have it, but they can. So Trump suggests he could restart Yemen bombing campaign in response to Red Sea blockade. So there you go. You know, now is going to try to attack there. Why? Because, oh, you want to take it out on someone else because you're losing a war against Iran. Ansar Allah had already warned shipping companies using Saudi ports that 2 oil tankers loaded with Saudi crude bound for China and India made U-turns in the Red Sea, headed for the Suez Canal instead of attempting to cross the Bab el-Mandab Strait. Yemen media reported that a total of 6 ships turned around following the warning. Trump suggested on Tuesday he could start a restart bombing campaign against Yemen in response to the Houthis. Trump's comments come after Ansarallah announced a maritime blockade against Saudi Arabia, which came after the Saudis bombed Yemen's Sana report, which is a terrorist attack, to prevent the landing of a plane carrying Yemeni delegation from Iran to enforce its long-standing blockade on the country that was eased under a 2022 ceasefire deal, but never fully lifted. Yeah, so the campaign ended in 2022. Well, Trump decided to escalate that. Trump launched a bombing campaign in Yemen on the 15th of March 2025, a few days after Ansarallah announced that it was renewing blockade for Israeli-linked shipping in the Red Sea in response to Israeli violating the January 2025 Gaza ceasefire deal, which was supposedly signed by Donald Trump. Remember the Gaza plan? Yeah, nobody really hardly talks about that anymore. It's because the Israeli state doesn't really have to do it. D.C. declares launch of pilot zones in southern Lebanon. Ah, there we go. You know, so, you know, you definitely see a lot of moves being made. The plan aims for the Lebanese army to take over the occupied areas from Israeli troops, but Israeli terrorists are absent in 2 of the designated pilot zones. So like everything else, though, you know, their Mossad-run Lebanese government will just take over for the Israelis there, so that way, you know, the Israeli state, you know, can return to Israel, but yet still occupy the country using their proxies in Beirut. D.C. announced the launch of its so-called Pilot Zones program in southern Lebanon on the 20th of July as part of a U.S. brokered deal between Beirut and Tel Aviv, which is, does not have anything at all to do with the memorandum of understanding, but has everything to do with Israeli state taking over. This millstone is a direct outcome of last week's discussions between the Israeli state and Lebanon in Rome. U.S. will continue working closely with both parties to implement the framework to a successful conclusion. Yeah, that the Israeli state now owns southern Lebanon. Israeli Prime Minister publicly named Fran and Zalta Elda and 2 initial pilot zones weeks ago. This plan is meant to see the Lebanese armed forces to replace Israeli occupation troops in the designated zones, basically meaning that you got the puppet government in there. Which is nothing that Hezbollah, because their deal is to just, you know, disarm Hezbollah completely. You know, but the memorandum of understanding is that they would stop their war against Hezbollah. Well, you see that's not happening. Nope, the war is resumed, the war is back on. It really never stopped anyways, but it's officially back on. So, as you know, these scriptures are playing out, especially these ones here in 2 Ezra chapter 15. You can see that indeed people are sick of Donald Trump over here, and they're tired of being lied to. He's lied worse than LBJ ever did about Vietnam. He's lied worse than George W. He's lied worse than Obama. He's lied worse than Biden. You know, and like everything else, though, the casualty rates are a lot higher than what he's telling them. So this is going to make everyone, and you're already hearing about mutinies within the U.S. military anyways. You already know that even before the war began that they were flushing the toilets in the Navy on those ships, you know, because they didn't want to fight this fucking war. You know, they're tired of the fucking wars, and they're tired of this shit-talking president. 2 Ezra chapter 15, verse 14, woe to the world and them that dwell therein, you know, a.k.a. the Third World War. For the sword and their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another with swords in their hands. You know, militaries against militaries, countries against countries. People fighting against each other with swords in their hands. You know, for there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another, which shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. And this is really talking about Babylon. Here in Babylon the Great, because like everything else, you know, pretty much they find out that there is no law here. You know, that president only cares about himself and it's only a special club. And people are just going to say, you know what, I got to defend my own. I got to take for my own. A man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able. Because of their pride the cities shall be troubled, and the houses shall be destroyed, and men shall be afraid. Is this going to be kill or be killed out of here? I mean, how many times have we talked about this in the streets? Well, it's coming to play out. Especially when there's no fuel. They'll be on their feet fucking destroying each other. A man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but shall destroy their houses with a sword and spoil their goods because of lack of bread and for great tribulation. So, like everything else, this is happening in our time today. You know, and it's going to pick up more and more. So hopefully this has all been edifying. For they don't say Bracha the Yahweh, Bracha the Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakakadosh, Wa Abal Babal. Brakatum, Jehovah elect, Shalom.